Today, I want you to join me in taking a spirituality quiz, if you will. So spirituality, what is spirituality? And especially in a humanist service, people will say, well, do we believe in spirituality? What is spirituality? I sometimes wonder, a lot of people say that they're spiritual, and a lot of people say these days, I'm spiritual but not religious. But I wonder, what do they mean by spiritual? What do we mean by spiritual? Well, I'm teaching a class every Wednesday night in February at 7 o'clock on Zoom. It's open to anybody who wants to come. And in this class, it's called Reimagining Your Theology, letting people begin to reconstruct, rethink what they think about a lot of these big questions that many people were taught about at a young age, rejected at some point, many people, and then maybe did or didn't rethink some of these concepts. So it's a fun class. It's been a meaningful class, and it's based on a book called Rebuilding Your Theology that was written by a colleague of mine, Richard Gilbert. And in it, he sort of gives a quiz, if you will. So today, it's kind of a pop quiz today. I want to ask you some questions about how is your spirituality. These questions, he says, help us to gauge how we're doing spiritually. So the first question on the quiz is, do you have a healthy sense of humor about yourself and the paradoxes of life? We all know religious people who have no sense of humor, right? It conjures up images of a stern, priggish mother superior figure, or a sanctimonious puritanical preacher, or the painfully pious chair of the Protestant Women's Auxiliary. I mean, we all have our sort of images. Now, of course, the secular world has its own version of stuffy, humorless, self-righteous personalities. So question one is, how's your spirituality quiz is, when in doubt, can you laugh at life? The point is that if you are spiritually alive, if your spirit is healthy, you have a sense of humor about your own failures, your own foibles, and the various paradoxes and crazy and mysterious parts of life. So, point one. The second question, to help you gauge where your spirituality is can you deal with the inevitable tragedies of life, including death? Now, spirituality is that part of ourselves. It's not the mind. It's not the body. We often talk about the three: the mind, the body, and the spirit. So when we go through a tragedy, a death, or a major hardship, our body's still there. It needs sleep, it needs food, it needs exercise and pleasure. But you're not going to sleep, eat, exercise, or pleasure yourself through and overcome your losses in this way. So, and your mind's going to have a lot to say, no matter what you're going through in the midst of tragedy and death, but you're not going to be able to think or reason your way out of the pain and the trauma and the fear and the grief. So what gets us through the most difficult moments in our lives is our spirituality. Now, people often come to me at the time of a diagnosis or after the death of someone they love, and they suddenly want to crash course in spirituality because they're suffering and they're looking for some ways, and their body and their mind are not getting them through it. And I've learned some ways, as all the ministers here at All Souls have learned some ways to help tap people into that part of us that is within everybody. And we all have this capacity. But in many of us, it's undeveloped if we don't have some practices or some ways to develop our spirituality. But I have to say that people who do work on and practice their spirituality or have some kind of spiritual practice, when they do come to a time of crisis in their lives, they're much more equipped and prepared to go through it. Think about it. We all have an inner life. Some of us never share our inner life with anyone else, but I know you might be thinking, well, my boss doesn't have an inner life, or my father-in-law, or whoever. We all know people who we might think that about, but we all have an inner life. whether we pay attention to it or not, whether we share it or not. I did a sermon some years ago in this congregation, and when people were coming in to the sanctuary, they were handed a rock. Everyone got a rock. And I used as the basis of this message that story that says, let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. I was lucky that, nobody tried to pelt me with a stone in the service. Always a little risky as a speaker to be handing out rocks to people before a message. But this was a message about forgiveness. And at the end, I told people that if they were having trouble forgiving somebody in their life, to try to think of something that they had done that had required them to be forgiven. And then when they left at the end of the service that day, I suggested that if they felt in their heart that they were ready to forgive whoever it was, that they could drop the stone and let it go. And the idea being that often we can forgive people when we're in touch with our own need for forgiveness and our own mistakes and the things that we've done wrong. It humbles us in a way that sometimes allows us to see the humanity in somebody else. Well, almost 5 years later, after this message, an old man who you wouldn't think had an inner life from the way he carried himself came to me, and he told me that after that Sunday, he took that rock, wasn't ready to drop it. He put it on top of his dresser in his bedroom so that he could see it every morning when he got up and got dressed. And it sat there for years, he told me. He said he'd been estranged from one of his adult children, and something had finally brought them together, and he wanted me to know that after all those years, he finally took that rock and let it go. And he wanted me to know how meaningful that was for him and how much he appreciates the ways in which coming to All Souls and being involved in his community and hearing the messages and hearing the songs has really made his life and his relationships better. And he really emphasized this idea that he said, I don't have a meditation practice. He said, I never pray when I'm by myself. He said, but coming to All Souls every week is my spiritual practice. It aligns and attunes my life with important ideas and ideals, and it helps me to feel better about how I'm living, and sometimes pushes me or goads me to live my life even better, and I always feel better about it. Spirituality is that part of ourselves that helps us through the difficult times. Those places that we can't think our way out of, those things that require us to go deep and go inside and touch a source of something that feels like it's larger than our typical mind-body connection. So the third question in Reverend Gilbert's spiritual quiz is, do you manifest your spirituality in the world so that people take inspiration from who and what you are? Do you manifest your spirituality in a way that other people take some inspiration from who and what you are? Now, I used to think that being spiritual meant that the people around me could see that I was always calm and happy and positive. I was sure that living an inspiring spiritual life involved me being able to walk down the street with a yoga mat flung over one shoulder and a vegan wheatgrass smoothie in my hand and one of those annoying half smiles on my face that makes a person appear like they don't have a worry in the world. Well, I figured if I could appear like that, then it was an outward sign of my inward enlightenment. My problem was that no matter how many spirulina-infused protein shakes I drank and how many downward dog poses I suffered through in a yoga class, I never achieved that aloof, irritating look of having a perfect handle on my life. I remember one time, years ago, I had to do a talk at an event here at All Souls. It was an evening talk, and I just didn't have it in me. I'd spent the afternoon at the bedside of a member who was dying, somebody who I'd really come to love over the years. And I was trying now to put a smile on my face so that I could inspire the congregation with my wit and wisdom and my naturally optimistic personality. And I was just not there. And I was explaining this to my colleague who was with me in my office as we were getting ready. And it was Justin Schroeder, I believe. Some of you remember Justin. And he said to me, well, maybe, Marlin, what the people want is not some caffeinated version of your personality that is hiding a much deeper truth, but probably what would be most meaningful to people would be for you to just go out there and be real. Sounded like a terrible idea to me. He was like 23 years old. What did he know? Well, you can imagine he was right. And possibly one of the most saving graces on the spiritual path for me has been learning that what inspires people the most is not being around someone who seemingly has it all figured out, but being with people who are willing to be vulnerable and open about their own struggles. Because those are the kind of people who inspire us to keep going when we don't have much left in the tank. So is your spirituality inspiring to others the way you live? I would say, if not, make sure you're not trying to be too perfect. Make sure you're not keeping in too many of the places where you struggle. Now, the next question, does your faith overflow into service? The point here is that if you're living your life just for yourself and you're not finding ways to help others or make some kind of positive impact in the world, then that's an issue, because there is no way to live a spiritually fulfilled life if you're living just for yourself. And then the final question on Dick Gilbert's spirituality questionnaire is, does your spirituality lift you and your life into a larger framework of meaning so that you see your life as a worthy project, so that you take joy in the work of your hands and your heart? The point is that spirituality is, in many ways, begins with a vision that we have that gives our life meaning. The vision or the idea, the concept that works most powerfully for me, that I find I live by, is the idea that we are all here in this life to learn how to love and be loved. When I'm in conflict with someone, for example, and what helps me rise above the pain and the betrayals and the slights and the indignities of a situation like that is that somewhere deep within me, I have the idea that I'm here to learn to love. So despite whatever's happening, when I stop and I breathe and I give myself a chance to take a larger perspective, I put it within this framework and I ask myself, what can I learn about love from what I'm going through right now? Because for me, learning how to love and how to receive the love that is all around me is why I'm here. All Souls, we say, we try to love beyond belief. Now, some people believe that everything happens for a reason. Now, that doesn't resonate with me personally, just because I've been through too many tragedies in my life and I've walked with too many people through hard times, and that concept doesn't really do anything for me. But I understand, though, how for some people that having this overarching philosophy gives them a measure of hope in the midst of difficult times. They may not understand why they're going through what they're going through, but they have a deep trust, no matter what it is, that it has some purpose or some reason. And I can see how that would give a person meaning and hope in the midst of all kinds of difficulty. The point here is that one of the measures of a healthy spiritual life is that we have some broader framework within which we understand our life, and it gives our life story meaning. Now, it can be a religious framework. For a lot of people it is, but as the phrase goes, you can be spiritual without being religious. There's lots of frameworks. The two I mentioned aren't particularly religious. Now, I know that the skeptics among us, and there are quite a few skeptics among us, I myself am often a skeptic in so many ways. They're going to ask me, but Marlin, how do you know that this framework, whatever framework or philosophy that you have that gives your life meaning, how do you know it's true? Well, there's a lot of ways that we understand what's true. Obviously, we're having a problem with that right now in this country about what's true, what's not true. There's so many conspiracy theories, and people believe in science, don't believe in science, or don't believe in science before they get sick, then believe in science after they get sick, or whatever. There's all kinds of alternative facts out there, and truth is a big issue right now. And how do we know what's true? As a matter of fact, I spent my whole class, my first class, last Wednesday night, talking only about this. How do we know what's true, what the truth is? And that was a great class. We're going to build on that. This coming Wednesday night at 7 on Zoom is going to be about what is spiritual versus religious, and what does it mean? Why does it matter? But for the skeptics among us, we're going to say, but Marlin, you can have a framework for your life, but how do you even know whether it's real, whether it's true? And what I want to say is that, as I conclude this message, is that it's important to live our life with a framework of a story that gives our life joy and meaning, even if someday we find out that it's not altogether true. For me, seeing my life as a journey to learn how to love and to be loved feels like a worthwhile enterprise, so that even if on the other side of this life I were to discover that, nope, you're wrong, it's all made up, there is no purpose to any of it, I will still feel good about the way that I ran my race. And that is the point of having a spiritual vision. Even if we can't be certain that it's true, are we living our lives within a framework of meaning that, whether it turns out not even to be true, we still have lived our lives in a way that we can be proud of, that's brought goodness into our lives and into the lives of others and our world. Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved Vietnamese Buddhist monk who just died in the last week or so, he said, spiritual practice is not just sitting and meditation. Practice is, he said, looking, thinking, touching, drinking, eating, and talking. Every act, every breath, and every step can be practice, and it can help us to become more ourselves, or in my case, to become more loving. So when we look at everything that's happening in our world right now, and we take in all the stuff that each of us are going through in our own personal lives, having developed a spiritual practice of some kind is one of the ways that can help us to get through, to find meaning, and to find joy in all of our days. And I want you to remember one thing: coming to All Souls, coming to the point, coming to any of our services on a regular basis is itself a profound and powerful spiritual practice. I'm glad you're with us today, and I wish you the best in the week ahead.
you.